Okay, so again, I want to welcome you to today's webinar, Simple Yoga Practices to Enhance Safety with Transfers and Improve Balance. Today's webinar is presented by Move United in partnership with Mind Body Solutions with support from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs.
Hey everybody, Amy from Mind Body Solutions. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Thank you, Julianne, for the introduction here. So today we have a lot of information to cover, and I do encourage you to download the handout. I hope to get to everything, and if we don't, you'll have it in the handout. And I just want to remind you too that I have just a couple of references on the back of the handout, and then I have some other resources. So this might be the most valuable part of today's presentation, is that you've got some resources on the back if you do want to delve a little more deeply into learning how to teach adaptive yoga. But today we're going to talk about some of the core sensations that we teach at Mind Body Solutions with the hope of helping the veterans that we work with find a greater sense of ease and grounding in the body, which will help them perform transfers more safely and also help to improve their balance. So we'll talk a little bit about balance as a sensation today. I'll hope to introduce that concept to you. But quickly, let's talk a little bit about the learning objectives, what we hope to cover today. I want to talk about, of course, how the principles of yoga can be used to help improve safety with transfers and enhance general well-being. We'll focus mostly on a couple of core sensations that we teach at Mind Body Solutions. The sensation of grounding, which is one of the most important sensations that we help people discover within themselves, and also that sensation of midline, because that helps a lot with stability, it helps a lot with safety, and it helps a lot with transfers. So those will be the two key sensations that we'll talk a little bit more about today than the rest of the sensations that we teach. I said we'll talk a little bit about balance as a sensation and how this can be used for greater stability and also greater body awareness as people move through their daily activities. And then we'll demonstrate, and I really hope you'll practice with me, some simple yogic practices that you can teach your veterans. But remember, if you've been to these webinars already with me, I want you to start practicing these, and from your own practice, your teaching will flow to the people that you're working with. So please practice along with me today as we work through some of these little activities. So at Mind Body Solutions, the demographic that we work with are people living with trauma, loss, and disability. They are a group of people that don't necessarily have quite the same access to yoga as people who are more able-bodied, if you will. Because of that, rather than focusing so much on the physical, the physical manifestation of the pose, we focus more on teaching sensation in the pose. And what that does is it teaches people to go inward a little bit, teaches them to listen at a slightly deeper level to what's going on inside the body. And from that, we begin to build the external pose. So we don't emphasize the physical manifestation quite as much because it may look very, very different on all of the people in any given yoga class. We teach several core sensations, and those are listed on your handout. Grounding, which we're going to talk a lot about today. Expansion, we'll talk a little bit about that because they go hand in hand. The sensation of balance, not necessarily teeter-totter balance, but actually balance as a mind-body sensation. We teach rhythm, we'll touch on that just a bit today, and we also teach the sensation of boundary, or the feeling of a little bit of a comfortable boundary around the body that allows you to feel safe and grounded, and then you can move from that. So simple practices that help our veterans feel more stable is where I want to go first. Simple principle to start with. We call go down to go up. In other words, you can't move up here until you're grounded in the body. And remember that one of the the most important things about feeling grounded is that sense of safety. So many of the people that we're working with move through their life maybe not feeling entirely safe, whether it be physically or whether it be emotionally, but we want to help teach them through the body that sensation of groundedness and safety. So we're going to go into our first exercise right away. What I want you to do is move toward the front of your chair. So if you're sitting back here, sit up toward the front of your chair. If your balance is compromised, please be careful doing this, or stay all the way back in your chair so that you don't have the possibility of tumbling forward. So I just want you sitting here. Notice I have my knees out in front of my hips. My heels are underneath my knees, and I'm just I'm just sitting up straight, nice and straight and tall here. And then I'm going to go drop back and lean back against the back of the chair. Now listen to what happens in your legs. Do they get a little duller? Do you not feel them? You're not paying too much attention. You know, this is the position that a lot of us spend a lot of time in, especially when we're on the couch watching TV. Now sit up straight and tall, drop down through the sitting bones, and notice how it brings a little bit more awareness to your legs. So simply by the fact of changing position ever so slightly, we can already begin to bring more awareness to the body. So again, drop back. Notice how the legs go dull. Maybe they want to splay out a little bit. And then come forward on the sitting bones. Again, lengthen through the spine, drop down through the heels, and notice how the legs become a little bit more alert. That's one of the first things we want our students and our veterans to do, is to be engaged. And so that might be the very first way you start teaching somebody to become a little bit more aware of what's going on in the body. So from here, we're just going to put our hands on our right here on the top of our thighs. Press down through your heels here, and then release. We're going to do it again, and I want you to notice what you feel in the rest of the body as you begin to activate through the feet. So press down through the feet. Do you notice that little lift in the chest? And if you don't notice the lift in the chest, relax your legs, and most likely you'll begin to notice the drop. Often when we begin a yoga practice with somebody who's living with a disability, the concept of lifting their chest and pressing down through their feet is a little bit foreign, especially the lifting the chest. And remember, we want to teach our veterans grounding so that we can begin the process of balance, or excuse me, begin the process of expansion and building strength underneath that sense of openness and expansion. So often we'll tell somebody to press down through their feet. We'll say, do you feel that little lift in the chest? And they may say no. And then we'll say, okay, relax. And then we'll say, did you feel the drop? And almost always people will feel the drop. And so then we go on. Let's try it again. Press down through your feet. Oh, did you notice the chest lift this time? Yeah, I noticed the lift. Okay, now this time follow that lift. And from there, you can go ahead and begin to build positions, whether it's an archery position, whether it's a yoga position, whether it's positioning in a wheelchair, helping people recognize that they can use all of their body to bring this level of deeper awareness is really, really key to beginning any kind of yoga practice, but quite frankly, any kind of mind-body practice that could include helping people learn to transfer better. So every yoga pose and every movement, or just about every movement, moves in two directions at once. So that's another simple concept I want you to keep in your mind as we go through some of these poses today. So notice that as we press down through our feet again, there's an upward direction. So we have energy or movement upward. We have energy moving downward. We want to help people expand in space. So think about how trauma, loss, and disability has the effect of making people live in smaller spaces. We all tend to move inward when we're dealing with trauma, loss, and disability. What we want to help our veterans do is explore larger spaces, but explore it in a safe way. And one of the nice ways to do this is to start with an exercise literally as simple as this one. Now, the question that might be coming to your mind is, what if I'm working with somebody, say, with a spinal cord injury, who doesn't have active voluntary muscle movement below the level of the injury? They may not have sensation, as we think of sensation, below the level of the injury. And we have lots of people at Mind Body Solutions who have spinal cord injuries, who practice yoga with us. And it's really amazing to watch the discovery as they begin to listen more deeply to what's going on in the body and recognize that they can actually utilize those sensations that are traveling even through the paralyzed part of their body for their benefit, for transfers, for improving their balance, for noticing if, say, their foot falls off the foot pedal of their wheelchair, helps them notice. And part of it is noticing that change of the position of the chest and the position of the body. So we're going to go a little deeper with this same exercise again. So sitting up straight and tall again, press down through your feet and feel the lift in the chest. Now, if you don't feel it, that's okay too, but I suggest you start practicing it, because I'm guessing you probably will if you practice it enough. And then release, and you feel that little drop. Now this time, press down through your feet at about, say, 50% effort. All right, so about 50% of what you were doing before. So press down through your feet. Notice what you feel in your body. Release. So did you feel another lift in the chest? I hope you did. If you didn't, again, it's okay. Just keep practicing. And as you begin to listen more deeply, you'll notice that flow and that movement within the inner part of the body. So when I press down about 50% or so, I still feel a little lift in the chest. It's not as pronounced as it was before, but it's still there. And that's something we have to begin to teach, especially our students and our veterans who are living with spinal cord injury, that they are all there, or there's even more of them there than they realize. Now, this will seem odd, but I want you to stay with me here. So this time, don't use any muscular force. I want you to draw your awareness down through your feet, push down through those heels, and notice what happens in the body. And then relax. And I'm going to have you do it again. So without any muscular activity, press down through your heels, really press down through your heels, but no muscular activity. Do you notice that lift in the chest? Do you notice that even if you don't have that voluntary movement, there's still movement. There's movement on the inner body that's taking place. Is this interoception or interoception, as some people call it? Probably. And I've got the definition of that on your handout today, and also a couple references if you'd like to read a little bit more about it. You know, we think of the ability to listen to the signals in our body and use them for our benefit. This is simply a way of listening to our body and using those signals to our benefit. So I have a little story to tell about that, because it's a hard concept to believe, and it's a hard concept for us to mentally grasp onto. About a month ago, a little over a month ago, we did our first online Move United webinar, and we had a group of yoga teachers from across the country. We did our 2-day yogic webinar that we had done once, once live or in person in February. And one of the participants, who was one of the yoga teachers in this webinar, was a young woman who had had a spinal cord injury, I think about 2 years ago. So she was still relatively new with her spinal cord injury. I think it was either waist level or rib level down. I don't remember exactly what her level was. But anyway, we started doing this particular activity. We started pushing down and feeling the lift and then dropping, pushing down, feeling the lift and then dropping. And then we went to the one that I just did now, and I said, without any effort whatsoever, I want everybody to press down and tell me what you feel. Now, she spoke up at that point and she said, you know, I think I feel something, but I'm not sure. And that's usually the first response we get, because our students and our veterans have been told over and over and over again, you don't have sensation there. You don't have muscular control there. And they've taken that in. And so usually it's kind of a doubting question that they have. I think I felt something in there, but I'm just not sure. And so I told her to keep practicing. And I told her that now I wanted her to start to utilize that principle when she made transfers. So anyway, a couple of weeks go past, and I'm on a Zoom call with her because we were doing some follow-up hours. And she said, I have something to tell you. She said, I hadn't been to PT, to physical therapy, for 2 months because of the pandemic, but I had been practicing pushing down through my heels and feeling that lift in the chest. So I went to PT, but I didn't say anything to my physical therapist because I was too embarrassed to say this stuff. But when we went to stand, I don't know if she was pulling up or if she was pressing down on the sides of the wheelchair. But anyway, she said, in my mind, this is what I did. I brought my awareness to my feet. I pressed down through my feet and I just popped right up. And she said she looked at the therapist and the therapist looked at her and he said, what have you been doing? And she didn't want to tell him. And then the entire session, she was able to physically perform better than she had back when she was having physical therapy. And she said it was all because she started to learn and started to practice pressing down through her feet and feeling that rise in energy and that movement in 2 directions at once. So I give that to you as an example of some of the things that you might start hearing, even though it seems a little bit squishy and it seems a little bit odd at first. I encourage you to try it, and I encourage you to try it with the people that you're working with. So that's a fun story. Again, it's one of those stories that I hold deep in my heart because those are the stories that help me move forward and teach this to other people too. Another principle that we like to talk about is the principle of alignment or midline. A lot of the people that we work with at Mind Body Solutions, and I'm sure that you're working with, might be out of the line one way or the other. They might be, leaning to one side, or one leg might be off to the side. And simply the fact of helping them come somewhat to the midline is an effortless form of mind-body integration. It's the beginning of feeling more centered, feeling more balanced, and from that, then you begin to build your movements or your activity. But before you push somebody in alignment, I want you to ask yourself, what problem are they trying to solve? So maybe somebody who's way over here and their head is tilted that way is trying to just keep their eyes level so they feel a little more on balance. So bringing them to the midline might really send them off. So we're careful as we begin to show people the midline. Maybe we just bring them a little ways. We don't bring them all the way into a rigid form of midline, but helping them learn to find that center can be very, very valuable. And we use that with props, which I'll show you in a few minutes. We might use gentle touch. We might use positioning with pillows or something like that. But we're going to do one little exercise now together. So please, again, do this with me. We call this stacking the bands. And again, it helps people find that sense of midline. So we're going to pretend that there's a band right around our hips. There'll be another band right around the base of our ribs. Let's say there's a band around our shoulders. And then let's say there's a band, kind of like a little halo, right above the top of the head. So sitting in the chair that you're in right now, stack the bands. Stack the bands right on top of each other. Notice if you're leaning more on one sitting bone and see if you can gently stack those bands. Now, of course, the people that you're working with maybe still may look out of alignment, but even that little minute movement toward the midline, stacking the bands, begins to integrate mind and body. So teach that, use that as a home exercise, and then begin to take them out of the midline. So let's all go and lean to one side. So notice as I lean to one side, I'm just putting my hand right here on the side of my chair. You can use a block or a desk or whatever's nearby. Notice as I lean over here, I get this kind of curve in the side of my torso. So from here, I want you to stack the bands. So remember where our bands were. Stack the bands, stack the bands, stack the bands, stack the head on top. Again, helping to find the midline even in this position helps people begin to notice that sensation of stability and that sensation of balance. And then come on back up to the center. Be in the center. And because this is yoga, we have to go to the other side. So again, just lean over. Notice again how this side of the body collapses. In many of our yoga poses, we want equal length of the torso, and that's what we're going for here. So I've got my hand down here for a little bit of support. I've bent over. I'm doing the kind of the curve arch right here. Now begin to stack the bands. So the band around the hips, and the band around the ribs, the band around the shoulders, and the band around the head. Breathe here, and then come on back to the midline. You can use that particular activity in any number of yoga poses. So let's take a seated yoga pose and use that concept. So I'm going to take my feet wide. So do this with me if you can. We'll go into a modified Trikonasana. So I'm taking my feet wide. I'm going to take one foot and I'm going to walk it out so it's straight. Remember, I'm on the edge of my chair. Please be safe, depending on where you happen to be in your chair. And I have one leg off to the side here. I'm going to come down to this elbow. So I'm coming down to the elbow, and of course, look what happens to my torso. Now, Trikonasana or triangle pose is a pose where you have various triangles that are being made from the shape of the body. So here I've got this rounded side again. So I'm going to stack the bands here. Lengthen, and notice as you do that how you feel greater activity in the legs and a better sense of grounding. As we move into the concepts of midline and grounding, these are the very simple activities we can use to help our students feel those concepts. And then once I'm here, maybe I'll take my arm out about 90 degrees, and maybe I'll look up, maybe I won't. An option for doing Trikonasana. Bring the hand down, come on back up to the center, and escort that leg back to the center. Be in the center for a couple of breaths. And then let's go to the other side. So we'll take our legs wide again. I'm going to take this foot out to the side. This heel is underneath my knee here. I'm going to lean over here. And again, I get this curve. So I'm going to stack the bands and lengthen to equalize the sides of the torso. And it's not just about lengthening, it's about actually activating the legs and sending energy down through the legs, creating a better sense of grounding. Maybe you'll take the arm up to the side if the balance is working okay. And maybe you'll look up. So many different things. And then from this, maybe you would take it over into a Parsvakonasana. So lots of different variations, but I'm less, again, concerned with the physical outline of the pose. I'm more concerned about what's going through the body and that energetic flow of the body. And stacking the bands is a really simple practice you can share with your clients that will help them begin to find that sense of midline. And then from there, you build on all of the different positions, whether it be yoga or, like I said, archery or whatever you happen to be doing. You start building the positions on that sense of stability and on that sense of grounding. Another very simple one that we use is just bringing our hands to midline. So some of our students can bring their hands to the midline like this. Some of our students, their hands might be more like this, or maybe we bring them to the center. But go ahead and bring your hands to the midline now. Line up your knees out from your hips, your ankles under your knees here. And as you're in this position, just slowly begin to energetically spread the palms. They don't have to get bigger, but bring your awareness to your palms. Spread through the palms. Now connect that sensation to the feet. Begin to stretch out through the fingers and the toes. And did you notice the chest may have lifted a little bit? As we begin to expand in the body, again, we get that movement of energy up. We get that movement of energy down. Build on simple little practices like this to help your students begin to grow and get bigger in space. I mentioned earlier also that we like to use props. So I'm going to show you a couple different props. I have just your standard yoga block. I like the 4-inch high ones. They're a little easier to handle. And this is a foam block. There are wonderful wooden blocks and cork blocks. They are a little bit heavier. And I like these because they tend to stick to people's pants a little bit better. The wood blocks tend to drop out. So I'm going to just put that between my thighs. You could put it this way. You could put it this way, whatever way worked out for you. I'm going to go this way today. And I'm taking my yoga belt here. Before we start our yoga classes at Mind Body Solutions, our assistants often go around to our students and they help them get set up this way. We have students that have been practicing yoga with us for a long time, and the first thing they know when they get into the yoga class is they want to get lined up because they know the benefit and the relief that comes with feeling that midline. You know, when you're first lining somebody up and bringing them a little more toward the midline before a practice of some sort, often they'll say it feels very strange, very uncomfortable. And sometimes I'll suggest to them that it might feel unfamiliar. We give them a little bit different word to use. Again, I would never do anything that caused pain. And you never want to shove anybody into alignment. You want to gently bring them toward the midline. And maybe somebody will never be quite this lined up. They might be a little bit more, you know, maybe it'll be like this. But if they came to class and their leg, say, was way out to the side, and you bring them partway back to the midline, they began to feel that quietness and that sensation that happens in the body. Some of our students with cerebral palsy will say that it feels like their body is a very busy highway. And when we bring them into alignment, that it slows down. The traffic on that highway slows down. And another one of our students, I think I said this in an earlier webinar, he said it's almost like you take the kinks out of a hose. And so the water can flow more freely, or the energy, the awareness in the body can flow a little more easily. So something worth trying. One of the ways we start our yoga practices at Mind Body Solutions. Get rid of those for now. Let's talk a little bit about balance, and we'll try tree pose here in a little bit, but thinking about balance as a sensation versus an accomplishment. So when we do a balancing pose, we look at what happens at the end of the pose. Were you able to stand on one leg in tree pose, or were you not able to stand on one leg? We look at the accomplishment part of balance. But rather than that, I want you to think more about the sensation of a balance as an equal distribution of presence throughout the body. And so a balancing pose could be sitting right here and drawing attention to every part of the body. It might be that pressing down through the feet and feeling that lift that we did to start our activities today. But spreading that awareness and that sensation can help with transfers, it can help with safety, it can help with that feeling of grounding that is so important as a precursor to other movement. So we'll practice a tree pose here in just a little bit. But while we're seated, I want to talk a little bit about getting ready for transfers. So preparing for transfers. No, you know that when you go from a sitting position to, say, a standing position, you have to lean forward and stand up. So I want you all to practice that just for a minute, but I want you to listen again a little more deeply to what's going on in the body, where you place your feet, what you do with your feet before you stand up. So I'm bringing my feet back a little bit, and I'll invite you to do this with me. I'm just going to lean forward and stand up. And let's go ahead and sit down. So notice the shift in your center of gravity as you come to a standing position from the seated position. So we're shifting our weight, shifting our chest forward, kind of over in that space between the knees. Now press down through your feet and come on up. And then reverse it and come on back down. A good preparation for this is something as simple as a cat-cow, which I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. I'm just going to drop my spine back, letting my sitting bones kind of tuck under here. And now press through your feet, come forward and lift the chest. This is the next step from where we started at the beginning when we were pressing through our feet and feeling the lift in the chest. Now we're getting more active and building a weight shift into it. So we'll drop back. Notice how you get lighter on the feet, how the awareness goes out of the legs. Come forward, press down through the feet, lift your chest. Can you see how this would be a wonderful way to help somebody begin to prepare for transfers? Help them begin to notice the dullness in the legs back here and the action, the activity in the legs as you come forward. One more time, we'll drop back. Press down through the feet, lift the chest, and you're almost ready to launch. Now, if you wanted to make this into a yoga pose or something to give somebody for a home exercise or to start yourself, I would use a block between your legs. You don't have to, but if you happen to have one, it's kind of fun. And this is a chair pose. We call it chair pose in yoga. So I put the block not this way, but I've actually put it this way in between my legs because it's a little more comfortable here for me. So chair pose actually is where you're off the chair, but we're going to do it off the chair and on the chair today. So let's go ahead and start first with our cat-cow. So we're going to sink back, and then we're going to press down and come forward. Let's do a couple of these. Sink back, press down, come forward, lift the chest, lighten your butt when you come up this time. Sink back, and almost begin to come up, but not quite. And then back down. Now this time we're going to put our arms into it and come up into a little bit of a chair pose. So I'm going to drop back, press down to your feet, come forward. We'll do it one more time. Drop back. This time my hands are going to come down. And as I use them for momentum, I'm coming forward and up into chair pose. And then with control, coming back. Let's do it again. Lift, drop back. Drop your hands down and slowly come up into chair pose. And then maybe you instruct your patient to hold there and then come on back. Now you can also do this without ever coming off the chair. In my seated yoga class, we do this a lot, but we don't come off the chair. So we might start here. We'll drop it back, I'm gonna bring my arms down, and then I'll come up almost like I was going to come off the chair, but I don't. But I'm working my legs just like mad here. I'm squeezing the block, I'm pressing down through my feet, I'm lifting my chest, and then drop back. And then one more time, we'll come up, we'll drop back, we'll get a little momentum, and come up, but not off the chair, but work those legs like mad here. Lift the chest, activate all the way out through the fingertips, pressing down through the feet, and then release and come back. Great way to help somebody not only begin to get the strength for transfers, but to get the direction for transfers. Remember, everything moves in two directions at once. You go down to go up. So we go in to go out, we go down to go up, and that helps our students and our veterans feel that sensation of moving in two directions at once, and that sensation of grounding and expansion. So simple practices for home. We're getting toward the end here. I want to make sure we get to some of the practices. We're going to take a standing pose here. So I'm going to come around. I'll move my chair out to the side. If you need a little bit of assistance of the chair, please make sure that you take that for safety. You want to make sure I'm all the way in your screen there. There we go. So I'm standing in simple mountain pose, or what we call Tadasana. I'm going to give my feet a little bit of space in between them now. Okay. And with one foot, I'm going to step forward and come up on my heel. So I'm on the heel and I've stepped my foot in front just a little bit. In this position, I'm going to draw my toes up toward my face. So the foot is very, very active here. Now, keeping the toes very active, I'm going to press the ball mound of the big toe down, spring that pinky toe off to the side, and then gently set all the toes down long. Keeping my foot there, I'm going to step in. So I hope you're doing this with me. Do you notice a difference in your feet? What do you notice on the foot that we activated? Do you notice a sense of spreading, a sense of grounding, maybe a sense of activation? Wonderful way to begin gait training. I'm going to back up here and do the same thing on the other side. Give myself a little bit of space in between my feet. Step forward and have my foot on the heel. Pull those toes up. Press down through the ball mound of my big toe. Spring that pinky toe off to the side. Slowly lay all of the toes down and then quickly step in next to it. Again, notice the sensation in your feet as you activate those arches, activate those feet before you begin your activity. And then again, you can do it with both feet. So I have both feet here. There's just a little bit of space in between them. And from here, I won't go back on my heels because that would be dangerous. So I'll lift all the toes, press down through the ball mound, spring that pinky toe off to the side, and then lay down all of the toes long. And if you do that, do you notice a little bit of a lift in the chest? I didn't tell you to lift the chest, but that activation, that grounding leads to a sense of expansion. And then this again is a wonderful way to begin all of the activities that you want to superimpose on this sense of grounding and expansion, and also a sense of distribution of awareness through the body that you're helping your students to develop. So, we always think of, or often in yoga, think of tree pose as a balancing pose, and it is a balancing pose. But I want to practice it in a couple different ways. So once again, I would invite you to stand up and do tree pose with me. If you're brave, you'll take off your shoes if they aren't off already from the last activity. But let's go ahead and just, I have the chair here, but I don't want you to use any support if you can do it without using support first. So let's go ahead and take a typical tree pose where you shift the weight to one side, you bring your foot up, anywhere. It can be here, it could be here, it could be here. I'm going to bring it up high here today. And then maybe you bring your hands to the center. And then you might grow the pose this way, or you might grow the pose this way, or whatever you want to do. And then let's go ahead and release that. And we'll do it on the other side. So bring our foot up wherever we need that. I'm using my chair already. There we go. Bring the hands to the center. And then from there, again, you can grow your pose up this way. You could grow your pose that way, whatever you want to do with the pose. So the interesting thing about a pose like this is there's a lot of gripping. I don't know, for the people who are joining me in doing this, can you feel where you're gripping in your body to try and maintain the sense of balance? So go ahead and let your foot down. I'm going to take a little bit of support. So I have a chair here. If you're lucky enough to be near a wall, I would go back and use a wall. It's a little hard to see me, so I'm going to be out here. But if you've got a wall, have a wall out and put your fingertips on the wall. So we'll go ahead and let's go ahead and stand on this leg, and we'll bring this the leg that's away from the chair out. So I'm just going to lean over here. Maybe I'm not going to go all the way up this time. Maybe I'm going to go a little bit lower this time. Notice the tendency of the body to drape into this hip, and let's lift out of that hip. Make sure you're using some support. Now draw attention to your feet. Spread the feet like we did in the exercise beforehand, and press this foot into the leg and the leg into the foot. From that grounding, allow for a sense of expansion all the way up the body. And then as you're ready, maybe you'll take the hands off the chair, maybe you won't. Maybe you'll keep it right there and allow for a greater level of sensation to be in this pose and be satisfied with a slightly different physical manifestation of the pose, but a greater level of awareness through the body. And then release. And let's take it to the other side. Tree pose, of course, can be done sitting down. And actually, had I not been working with a bunch of people in the middle of the day, because I'm sure most of you are in the middle of your workday, most of the time I would take tree pose on the floor first. Well, I would take it standing up, then I would bring people down to the floor and I would show them how to do tree pose where you don't have the effect of gravity, and then I would bring tree pose up into a standing position again. Again, allowing them first to feel the teeter-totter balance, then bringing them down to the floor where balance or the fear of falling isn't an issue. Remove the effect of gravity, help them spread that awareness throughout their body, and then bring them up and try it again. So because we aren't getting down on the floor today, that's why I'm using the chair. So using the chair, I'm going to go with, again, a lower position of my leg. Again, watching for this hip and drawing that hip in toward the midline again. This might be my pose here. Pressing down through both feet, spreading the feet, noticing that little bit of lift in the chest, stacking the bands, some of the other things that we've been doing today, and then maybe the arm goes out, or maybe the arm goes up, or maybe just to the midline. Breathing there. Remember, we layer the breath into these positions because it's so common for us to hold our breath when we're doing these positions. And then release and come back to the center. Notice how you feel. Feel free to modify those in any way for the people that you're working with. Maybe they do tree pose with their back against the wall. Maybe, as I said, we do a seated tree pose. Working through the same concepts, maybe you do it lying on the floor. If you've got a group, or a patient that you can get on the floor with. One of my favorite poses to think about playing with the concept of balance as a teeter-totter principle, and also as an equal distribution of presence throughout the body. I know we need to take some time for questions here. So Bethany, You can pop in whenever you want. I think we've gone through the rest of these using props to engage the legs and spine. Remember, we took a block and we put it in between our legs and we put the strap around it. We did waking up the spine with our cat-cow, and then we did some playful movement with tree pose. So lots of information here, and I know you were kind of drinking through the fire hose today as I was giving you so much information in a short time, but please take a look at this handout and of course contact me if you have any questions at all. Okay, I said I would leave some time for questions. So Bethany, whenever you're ready.
Yes, so we've just got one or two questions, and one is kind of a bigger question, I think. Okay. So if we're doing yoga virtually, how do we train the participants on anything they need to utilize, especially if they've never used it before and the training is happening virtually, such as trying the block or tying the block, strapping the block to themselves, or using blocks or other tools for the very first time?
Yeah, that's a challenge. And you know what, I've been teaching yoga virtually for a while now. Well, it seems like a while. I guess it's only been a couple of months, but we've been doing a lot of it. So I recommend to my students that they purchase props for home, and they can be purchased, you know, in their local, you know, Target or something, or they can be ordered on Amazon. There's a learning curve for sure with any props. So the hardest thing, I will tell you by far, is cinching a belt. So when I'm teaching, and I was doing this morning in my class, teaching people to cinch a belt can be very complicated. So often what I will do is before I start class, we never start class on time. We always leave 5-10 minutes for people to talk, even online for community building within our classes. So during this time, I might say, hey, you guys, if you've got a yoga block, go ahead and get a yoga block. Now, people may not have a yoga block, so I might say, grab a pillow. And so maybe somebody goes over and they take a pillow, and that gives them that midline orientation. So maybe they don't have a block, and that's okay, or they just do it without a block. And you could use a book or something like that too. A little bit harder to hold between your legs though. And then often I have them work on the belt position that I need before we even start class. And if there's somebody around, somebody else might help them. And I will often come right up close to the screen. I'll say, okay, these are my two positions, my belt, and I'll show them how I bring it in one side and then out the other, and then how then it should be taught. So I will often do some teaching by coming close to the screen so they can see exactly what I'm doing, and I would have done it a little bit slower, but I know our time is limited here today. So that's one nice way of doing it. And if you have them start out with a cinched belt, let's say you're going to do several things with the belt on any given day, maybe we'll start with it wide, and we'll start out with some, you know, some shoulder warm-ups or something like that with the belt. So I'll have the belt start wide, and then I'll say, you know, put it underneath your feet, and now let's grab the block, and then we're going to cinch it a little bit tighter. So once it's cinched, then you can do a whole lot of things with it. But there is a learning curve, without a doubt. And so my advice, if you're starting out and you're teaching students who are just starting out with using props, that you go really slowly and you show, just like I did earlier, there are a couple different kinds of blocks. So here, these are two foam blocks, and as you can see, one is about 3 inches and one is about 4 inches thick. You may have a personal preference. Again, for teaching online, I almost always use a foam block. One, because it's really visible. So you can see when I put this block down, the blue block on my orange mat, that's very intentional that I have two very different colors so people can see where my block is. And then also making sure, I like the wider block because it seems to fit a little more easily in between people's legs. It seems to be a little more comfortable And I like it because it doesn't slide. I like the foam blocks because they don't slide when people aren't able to squeeze the block quite as much. But we use all sorts of different props. We use sandbags. One of my favorite props in the whole wide world is a sandbag. So you might encourage people to buy one of those if you've been teaching for a while. It provides a wonderful sensation of grounding on the thighs or on the feet. Wonderful way to feel a sensation of grounding. And we also use bolsters. I have a few bolsters in here. Some people will want to purchase a bolster. Otherwise, people will use pillows. But again, if I'm teaching online, I make sure that all of my props are different colors so that you can see when I'm layering them on and you can see what I'm doing. Helping yourself and your props be very visible is probably one of your best teaching tools in going very, very slow with them. Okay, I think I'll leave that there. Is there another question, Bethany?
There's one more question and a couple more minutes. Can you mention again where rhythm comes into play?
Sure. We too often don't recognize the enormous loss of rhythm that our students and our veterans and our patients who are living with a disability experience. So if your gait or your walking pattern is interrupted, that's a big interruption in this beautiful rhythm. You know, those of us who don't live with an overt disability take for granted how easy it is to get up from a chair. We take for granted how easy it is for us to walk across the room, to seamlessly move from one position to another. But rhythm is so important, and that fluidity of movement is a really powerful thing to share with people. So I start very, very slowly when I'm introducing rhythm to people who have a lot of disability. I think I showed this in one of our first or second webinars, but I may just start with something like this and help them very, very slowly begin to feel the sensation of rhythm again. Maybe it's this. But cat-cow is reasonably accessible to most people, and most people love it. You know, we say it kind of wakes up the spine, and that's why we do the cat-cows. And if that's difficult, we'll do something smaller. We'll do a kitty cat, which is just really your sternum here. Well, I let it sink back, and then I lift it. I let it sink back, and I lift it. Little movements right at the hub of the wheel can be profound. So start working on that rhythmic movement with the people you're working with, and then start bringing it into transfers. So as we were doing today, we were doing cat-cow, and then we brought a little bit of momentum into it. And then we practiced grounding and expansion as we came up into chair pose. And then slow going down. One of the principles we always teach in yoga is you come out of the pose doing the pose. So you don't come up here and then just plop down. You slowly come down out of the pose. Wonderful tools for teaching transfer and to help people feel that wonderful innate fluidity of movement that often gets lost in disability. So I love teaching rhythm, absolutely love teaching rhythm. Okay, I hope that helped. I see that we are out of time. So Julianne, I'm going to hand it back to you. Thank you all for attending. I love sharing yoga with you, and look forward to seeing you again in a couple weeks.
Yes, thank you so much, Amy, for another great webinar this afternoon. It's always a pleasure to attend your courses and pick up some new nuggets that we can use in our practice and our everyday life.